and uh, check this out here. So we're live here with Steve Stack here. Steve is a very well adversed gentleman that is not normal. As I met him for the first time tonight, but been watching him over the financial space over social media. He has a great story that we all will leave from tonight, be inspired based off his story. Steve is a first generation millionaire. Steve became a millionaire at the age of 31. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe Steve is 36 today. And so he's going to share his journey in regards to how in the world was he able to be successful financially at a young age in life. He's a man of faith, he's a man of God. And so that's why I love this even more tonight, because everything that he's done, he gives the honor and the special thankfulness to God for being able to bless him. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you guys from North Carolina, Steve Stack. Hey, Steve, how's it going?
Hey, what's going on?
Good, man. Good, good, good. I want to thank you for joining in to our Let's Win Financial community, community, man, that's focused on just empowering, growing in our finances. We talk about finances quite a bit, but I always like to bring on different guest speakers that at certain levels of where we're trying to be, we're working on it, and then we're hearing how other successful people were able to get at those particular levels. And you've been here at an early age, so I want to start out, man, and if you don't mind, just tell the Let's Win Financial community a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yeah, a little bit about me from a just, I think where I'll start is that first off, I'm just a regular guy. Um, I like to tell people that I'm an ordinary person that happens to have extraordinary discipline. Um, and so I grew up in the South, from originally from South Carolina, the capital, Columbia, South Carolina, to be more precise, and came up in a real, just regular family. My dad was, worked with his hands, a skilled tradesman. He did reupholstery of furniture. And my mom, she was a homemaker or a stay-at-home mom, with me and my two siblings. And so we didn't come from great material wealth, but what I always like to share with people is I feel that I had an extremely rich inheritance and heritage that was passed to me that was very wealthy, with love, generosity, rich in faith, and just a mindfulness of others in the community. Uh, and what I'll add to that is that they did have a pretty firm foundation when it came to money management or stewardship, as far as just the basics of live within your means. So don't spend more than what you make. And I'm gonna go old school for a second. So today, like
Oh, that's fine.
nowadays, people
That's
call
fine.
it an emergency fund. I came up, it was called a rainy day fund,
That's right.
so that you save money for a rainy day because you never know when it's going to rain. So that was really the the environment that I came up in, was just one to really love people, value people, um, and just some of those building blocks of the things that I would say, as far as that first generation millionaire piece um, is concerned. So I'll say this one more thing, and then I'll let you ask me more. Uh, but a lot of times people, they'll ask me like, "Man, how did you become a self-made millionaire?" And what I like to tell people is, first off, I'm not self-made, I'm God-made.
Mm.
But then next on top of that, it would be a disservice for me to say I'm self-made, because I'm really standing on the shoulders of the people that came before me, and the foundation that they laid uh, for me to be able to build on. And my hope will be for the people that come after me, that they'll stand on my shoulders and benefit from the efforts that I put forth to see them win. So
Yeah. And Steve, I say, man, that's phenomenal because of your story, being able to be where you're at. But at the end of the day, you're humble with it as well. And that's what we really like, man, as far as God will continue to bless you more because of your humbleness as far as what you've been blessed with at such an early age. So you know, we want to even get a little bit more in depth into deep into. I know the crowd want to hear, hey man, you first generation millionaire. How in the world, what steps did you do to get to that particular, I want to say milestone per se?
yeah. So here's the first thing is I realized this at a pretty early age, that I would be trying to, I'd make some money, I'd save, because that's really what I knew to do. I'm like, hey, I can live on less than what I have coming in, and I could save money. But I started doing the math, and I'm like, man, I'll never get there if I'm just saving money. And it clicked for me. I'm like, I cannot save my way to wealth. I must invest. And so that's the first thing I just want to encourage people on is you're going to have to invest. You're not going to be able to save your way there. You will have to. The good news is you can build wealth through investing. And so uh, once I came to that realization, I'm like, okay, well, where are some of the engines to do that? And one of the first things was the stock market. Of okay, well, a lot of people, they'll invest in stocks and different funds, mutual funds, index funds, and different things like that. So let me get an understanding of how that works. And I also was aware that real estate, I'm like, hey, we got to live somewhere. People have to live somewhere. So that's a thing too. And so I began to just try to read about it, try to ask around with people, and my network of people, man, they were just like, they were just proud of me for asking the questions,
Mm.
but they didn't know the answers.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
so it was like, okay, well, I'm not necessarily getting it here, which I think is a pretty wild benefit of how the times are now, as far as you think about the internet and social media, that it's easier to be able to connect with people that are in the space that you want to get to. We ain't have that when I was coming up. Like we still had an encyclopedia set
Yeah.
that you had to update once a year
Mm.
to know, what the new information was. But yeah, so what I did is I started in the stock market when at that time I had a 9 to 5 job. And when I had started working, it was right in the beginning of the Great Recession. So in that 08, 09-ish time frame is when I had started working. Now I'd already been reading and getting some understanding of things. But when I looked at the news, my thought process was, hey, if things are half as bad as what they're saying it is, then it's probably a good time to try to invest. And so I started with just the basics of what I knew, which was, hey, let me put money in this work retirement plan or a 401k, depending on the work that you do. That may be a 403b. a TSP if you're work for the federal government, a thrift savings plan, a 457. There's a lot of different numbers and letters. But for me, I started with a 401k, and I just had this bright idea of, instead of me just getting the match, I looked at it and said, well, my nicest piece of furniture when I was in college was a futon. So I don't really need a whole lot more than that. Let me put as much money in as they'll allow me to, beyond the match, which I think at that time the most I could put in was $16,000 in a year from the pre-tax income that I was making. So I started with that, and then I said, hey, I want to buy some real estate. And I didn't know anything really about it. I hadn't taken any courses, didn't have like a mentor or anything like that. I just had this bright idea of, okay, well, if I can buy a property that is quote unquote cheap, or just, very low in value, but it needs work, if I can buy it and possibly fix it up, maybe I can sell this thing for more than my acquisition costs and repair costs combined to get a chunk of money. And so I did that once, learned a bunch of lessons, and made a little bit of money, maybe made like a few thousand. Today would have made way more, but I was just figuring it out. And then I did it again, and it was more successful. And I took the proceeds, and then I bought my first multifamily property. So my actual first homes that I bought, or properties that I bought, were not ones to live in. So while I was doing all this, I was renting at the time, because I was just like, hey, I want to try to figure this out. So those were the building blocks that got me started, was buying when things were low, and then really holding for a while, then selling when things were a lot higher. And obviously we can get into some of the weeds and some of the details, but that's from a high level. That's where I started, and eventually there started to become more zeros. Some commas started getting in there, and it moved pretty rapidly.
Steve, I think that's pretty good, because you mentioned two ways that is your building blocks, right? As far as investing in the stock market and real estate. And those really your two biggest platforms when it comes to, I say building wealth, but I like to say financial freedom, because sometimes people say building wealth, they could just misconstrue it and take it a different way. But that financial freedom for you and your family. And so with those steps, right? I want to come back to the stocks and the real estate, but I also want the community to know your background as far as your family, and then what are some of the ways that you're doing the generational building now with what you've established with the stocks and the real estate, and then dive in a little bit more into those particular deals.
Yeah. So I'm married. I've been married for a little over 11 years now, and I've got 3 kids. I've got 2 girls and a boy. And so some of the generational piece, which I didn't get into this, but I'm gonna go back and then I'm gonna bring it all the way forward. So I'm only 3 generations removed from slavery.
Wow.
And that was not a misspoken detail there. Literally, my great grandfather was born in 1859 on a slave plantation. One of his children, my grandfather, was born in 1897.
Wow.
And then he later would have 12 kids, which my mom was number 12 out of 12. In the late 40s was when my mom was born. And then you see me,
Wow.
who was born in the 80s. Um, so it's important to even just know where you came from, to know where you're at. I obviously don't know my great grandfather. I mean, he passed well before I was born, but my grandfather was a man of the community, man of faith, like always thinking big picture. And so he had a mentality of, hey, you want to live within your means, different things like that. And he passed that on to my mom and my dad. They were on the same page. And then they taught that to me. So I had the live within your means and the saving piece down. I had to really learn the investing side. But my children, they know that. So I'm already doing little things with the two younger ones, but with the oldest, we actually wrote a book together just talking about money,
Wow.
just our money conversations. And so my now 9-year-old daughter, but when she was 8, we wrote a book together. Like, she understands that stocks are just small ownership pieces of a company. Because I didn't know that stuff coming up, and it's no, obviously no disrespect to my parents. They just didn't know. They were just more so just focused on living and having a life of just meaning and impact and working hard and taking care of a family. Um, but that's some of the things of what it looks like of the generational piece. Because I will say this before getting into the details, is what I'm about to say is both encouraging and a little bit discouraging for me. Is there's a stat that says 80% of millionaires are first generation, that they did not inherit their wealth.
Mm.
And so on one end, that's encouraging because it means that it's possible,
Mm.
that it can be done, that if you didn't come from it, it's possible that wealth can come from you. On the other end, what I look at as I say is, well, only 20% are effectively passing on wealth
Mm.
to the next generation. So what is the gap? Where is the disconnect? And I think where that is it's not just passing on material wealth, but it's also what's the aptitude, or do they have the mental capacity, the social capacity? Are they equipped to handle wealth like that? And the values, the work ethic that was involved, the discipline to build it, will they take that with them? So that's really where my mindset is now, is how does this pass not only to my own children, but to their kids,
Mm.
and God willing to theirs,
Right. Right.
that it continues.
Right.
So we can all have these types of conversations. I talk about some of this in the book of just being intentional, like going to the grocery store, having a list, inviting your kids to be in the process of making the grocery list. Of course, they're gonna pick crazy stuff, like, I want 10 boxes of Lucky Charms or something. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah.
And you may just put something crazy on there just because you want them to be engaged and involved. Like, hey, you know what? I wasn't necessarily thinking about getting fruit roll-ups, but we're gonna get some
Mhm.
because I want them in on the process. But then showing the discipline of sticking to your list when you go to the grocery store and get what you get, and having those types of conversations. Or I'll take my kids to the bank on purpose. I'll make up a reason to deposit money so they can visually see that money isn't just about buying stuff, but that they can see, okay, you do put it away too, or have them, especially pre-COVID, of have them come up to the teller and count the money for the teller themselves and have it deposited. Or if you're doing a withdrawal, having them do the withdrawal and count the money that, hey, did we get what the withdrawal was? But just trying to meet them where they're at on different just everyday life things that I think is really important for generational wealth. Now, strategy stuff, there's all kinds of things of different accounts that you can open on their behalf, or setting up things like a trust, and all these different things to help aid the process. But I think the most important thing is for them to see you do it, to see you save,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
have those conversations around investing. If you're doing it, if you're not, that you're actively learning, whether you're connecting with somebody who is doing what you want to do and being mentored or coached and encouraged, or whatever the case may be. So,
Yeah.
but I'll
Yeah.
hopefully that helped.
Yeah, no, I think that kind of sets the background as far as this community knowing a little bit more about your background and family and the kids. And so let's talk about this here. You mentioned those two things between real estate and investing, right? So when you look at your what are you worth, which is your net worth, you take your assets minus your liabilities to figure out whatever your net worth is. Between the investing and the real estate, let's just hear a little bit more about what between the stock investing in stocks and the real estate, which one holds the most value in your particular portfolio, and then maybe which one do you like the most, right? I'm sure probably both, but which one did you enjoy the most through some of the challenges you maybe faced with the real estate, but you just kind of want to talk about the spark difference between the two, and then which one do you hold the most in as far as overall investing?
Yeah, so I would say when I started out, it was definitely real estate because you can put your hands on it, like you could see it. It's like, oh man, like this this building looked a certain way and was able to restore it to a place where it's meaningful for someone to be able to live in, that you had a vision, or I had a vision of, I see this place, I see what it could be, and to be able to quote unquote create and see that come to fruition, that was something I really enjoyed. And I enjoy the passive income with the multifamily rentals, and building those up over time. um, I'd say now, which I still really like real estate, but over the past some odd years, I've really started to enjoy the stock market, and investing in that way of analyzing companies, understanding what they do, and being able to have high conviction and buy into them and watch somebody else run that company and build it up into something awesome. So that's where I would say now is more that side. And especially with the events of the last about 15 to 18 months, the stock side it has definitely surpassed the real estate side on the net worth end. And also likes the stock side because it's more liquid.
Mhm.
Even though I would encourage people to hold it as long as you can. Like long-term investing is really where it's at. A lot of people will try to make it seem boring or not flashy. Trust me, do yourself a favor. Tonight, I want you to go and you can just pick two companies that everybody's heard of. Look at an Apple, look at an Amazon, look at where it started, at what the price was when it started versus where it is right now. And that doesn't, for Apple, they have dividends. So that doesn't even include those. And you'll be amazed at the growth of just holding quality for an extended period of time. So
Awesome, awesome. So, Steve, let me ask you a question here. When you mentioned the real estate, right, for it's your first real estate deal, and a lot of times people would like to buy real estate, but obviously buying real estate, you got to have some initial money up front.
mhm.
Versus the stocks, not so much, right? You get to start, but you get real estate, you got to have down payment. I would say, what type of strategies maybe did you had on your first go round on your first real estate, and then as you bought more. Did you leverage it for some of your properties that you had to buy more? So I'd like to hear a little bit more like about that aspect.
Yeah. So the way I had started was I just did a just regular conventional loan, did a down payment. So I got lending from a bank institution, and worked it that way. Which, like I said, it was a lot with that first one. Then I became aware of things like construction loans, or where you can actually put the cost of the work, like say if you're fixing it up for a fix and flip, you could actually get that added in to the loan, uh, and as well as the acquisition. So you're buying it and you're lumping in. So say if there was $25,000 worth of repairs to be done, and you were buying a property that was, let's say it was $150,000, you could set it up to where you're buying it for 175 because the repair costs are being lumped into the purchase of the property. So that's what I did to get started, but I knew I wanted to move away from getting the chunks to buying and holding, even on the real estate side. And so that's where I quickly moved to buying multifamilies, renting them out, and just holding them over a longer stretch of time. So,
Hey, Steve, I want to talk about this really quick because with multifamilies, right, we see it advertised as it's all good because you get the cash flow, you get the appreciation, but you know it as a landlord, there's work that's involved with that, right? Of course, it's very good.
yes.
It's we I I own multifamily, so I love it. What were some of the challenges that you faced with those multifamilies, and then how you was able to kind of overcome those challenges. And do you still own them today?
So yes, and some of the challenges were, I can remember buying one where I knew, for instance, that there was only one water meter. So I was responsible for the water bill for both units because there was no way to split them. Now I was able to get a better price point on buying it, but I still ended up having to pay meaningful money. I want to say, if I could pull it, I want to say I had to pay something to the tune of $2,500 or $3,000 to get it split, and just having to deal with the county. I mean, it's a lot of red tape that had to be dealt with to get that there, which you guys will probably appreciate this. As soon as the water bill went to the tenants, magically their water bill went down.
Wow.
they weren't using as much. So you had things like that. Sometimes there were some situations where I had to evict a tenant, or just some of the different things that you have to deal with as a landlord. Now, my mentality has always been that I want to treat people with dignity, with respect, and just treat them like they've been created in the image of God. So um, I would try to work with the tenants, and I had a property manager. That's how I would do in those situations. Um, and you have some interesting stuff. I mean, I was born at night, but not last night. So there will be some times where I remember I had one tenant who literally told me that her grandmother had died. And so she had to, or that her grandmother was dying, and that she had to have an emergency trip up north to visit. And then a few days later, the tenant that lived next to her was like, had told my property manager, "Oh, she's still here." So she either nobody died or was dying, or she just never left. And so that was definitely a serious conversation that we had to have.
And Stephen, you were still responsible for paying that mortgage every month too, even
Oh,
though
for sure.
that rent was
Right.
probably not coming in that month, a little late.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Absolutely. Which, you have to manage. So like with all these things, it takes discipline. So if you don't have discipline in your personal finance and you've got rentals, you got to have discipline. You got to have money management skills to prepare for paying for a water meter to be split, or if you have a vacancy or late payments with tenants. I've been extremely fortunate that my tenants have been overwhelmingly amazing, just across the board. Very rarely have I had to have a lot of static. I mean, even with the pandemic, people were very reasonable, and I would work with my tenants. So yeah.
That's awesome in itself. So the covering down on the real estate, and that's one of your biggest. What would you probably say your biggest transaction in your real estate, as far as buying the multifamilies or the single families?
Um, multi multifamilies be the biggest transaction, and yeah, one that if I know you didn't ask this question, but I will share it with you
Yeah.
all. One that if I could go back, but I did everything I knew at the time. Now today I know more, but there was a situation where there were 9 duplexes that somebody was selling, and they were asking $60,000 per duplex. Now I already had properties in this area. And so I knew that things were appreciating. Like I knew that this was a steal of a deal, but the problem was that the seller, like it wasn't an 18 unit property. It was 9 individual duplexes, and the seller would not sell any of them individually. It was just all as a whole. And I couldn't take on 9 loans to buy it. And I was in a spot where I just didn't have the funds oriented in a way for me to be able to buy it. You all today, those properties, this was 2014, and I very much wanted to buy them. I knew
Woo!
that it was going to go up.
My God.
Today, 2021, those properties are selling for $160,000 a pop.
Wow. Wow. So
Yeah,
that's $1 million
I
deal, not even counting the cash flow.
not even counting the cash flow, which they were mismanaged. So like I knew the things that needed to be done to get them in a better space. But like the cash flow was 40 grand a year. The positive cash flow was $40,000 with the mismanagement at that time. But I was in a space where I was not prepared for the opportunity. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to take advantage of it. And that I'll probably remember that for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Of
Hey,
not being
Steve,
able
I
to.
always say this one particular quote here, right? There's nothing more expensive than a missed opportunity, right? And
Oof.
so, but in your case, though, right, you was obviously able to benefit from other deals that that you were
Yeah.
successful on. But as you look
Right.
back now, you're thinking like, man, that's a hindsight movement. And you think about now with the way the real estate is, by just having ownership, a lot of homeowners, landlords are seeing just equity built up into these particular properties. And I think that's the main message what we would like to pass along, not just with real estate, but with anything in life. Once you have ownership and equity, you look at Rihanna yesterday, right? She became, well, it was on social media and the
Mhm.
media outlets. She became a billionaire because she have ownership into her particular company. So
Right.
that's very good, man. Now let me ask you a question here. When you got to your millionaire status, right? What were some of the things that you and the family did, and some of the things that you're doing now to continue to build on to what you've already established?
Yeah. So it was when I hit a million, in some ways it was surreal, exciting, and also like anticlimactic. You know what I mean? Like just kind of you're rolling, you're doing the same things, like making the same decisions over and over again. Um, but what we ended up doing was there were just like some little things that kind of sprinkled out. Did a little bit more travel, because you got to realize, like once you amass that kind of money, it's working for you at that point. So if you got a million invested, your 10% is $100,000. So so started to let off the gas in some respects, doing a little bit more traveling, doing some things just to kind of enjoy. One big thing is giving more. We were more just a little more generous in giving to others. Um, and but what I would say is the big thing, honestly, because hit a million at 31, but went ahead and paid off the house at
Mm.
32.
Ooh, nice.
Yes. So and it's this one. It's the one I'm sitting in right now. I'm just in my office space. Um, so like didn't get wild at 31, but when we paid off the crib, that one was different. That one was different. I mean, the
Oh,
grass looked a little greener outside.
yes, sir.
You know what I mean? The birds, they chirped a little
They
bit
chirp a little bit.
louder. You know what I mean? Like it was different. I'm cutting the grass. I'm like, man, this is some good grass right here. So that one would be where I would say it really changed up, because when we paid off the house, what that essentially meant was literally I could get a job at Mickey D's
Mm,
and cover all of our living expenses
mm,
with a little money to spare.
mm,
So you want to talk about financial freedom?
there it is.
Like, see, so I'm gonna just be real with y'all, okay? Hopefully y'all don't mind if I
Hey,
if
we
I just
ready.
get real
Let's
with you for a
go.
second.
Yeah.
So just come in with me. Imagine what Mondays hit like if you're on the job and factually, I do not have to be here. If I don't want to be here, I don't have to be here, because my expenses, like everything's paid off. House, vehicles, no credit card debt, no student loans, no personal loans, no car notes, Like just everything is covered. So you've got that. And then you've built up the kind of wealth where it's working for you at this point. Mondays hit different. Like you're a little less stressed. If you're on the job, you tell people precisely what you think. And believe it or not, like you can be a better whatever, better business owner, better employee, whatever the case may be, because you know your check isn't already spent. Like your funds can go towards whatever it is that you want it to go towards. So some of the things that we did after paying the house is we went to like this indoor kind of water park place called Great Wolf Lodge, just in the middle of the week, just cause we just rolled up, said we in there. That was, and then the next month we went to Disney World.
Wow.
You know,
there
this
you
is
go.
pre-COVID. It was pre-COVID.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We went to see old Mickey and them.
There you go.
My wife and I, we went to LA to visit some friends, like maybe 2 months later after Disney World. And that was fun, which that's a whole nother story. Maybe y'all have to hit me up another day about that one, but ended up on The Price is Right.
What?
And you see your boy on the final showcase too, but that's another story for another day. We ain't gonna worry about that. That was fun. Drew,
wow.
And what's his name? Drew Carey. He's actually pretty funny.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but yeah, all kinds of stuff. Like, so I'm more of an experienced person, more so than stuff. So going to different places, Italy, Hawaii, I had never been until, after that, and, some different things like that. So, yeah, those are the differences.
Wow, man, that's outstanding. When you say you pay the house off, bro, I mean, that's just one, like, man, like there's nothing holding you back now from not doing whatever you want to do in life, because you don't have your big expense hanging over your head anymore, man. So are you guys debt free as well? I'm sure, right? The house is paid off. You guys don't carry any debt.
Oh yeah. No, everything is squared up. Like I said, the vehicle's paid for, house, and not carrying any, consumer debt.
So Steve, let's talk about this for a second, and then we're gonna have a question and answer session here for the people that's on.
Okay.
By having all that stuff paid off, and then now having all these investments, now your money is your money that's incoming, right? But most people, when they get money, right, they'll say, okay, I want to make $100,000 a year. But I always ask people, right, it's one thing to make $100,000 a year, but do you have $100,000 a year? And then for your particular case, with everything paid off, you have this 100,000, whatever you're getting on a monthly income. So what are some of the things that you're doing now to even further enlarge some of your investments? Are you looking at buying more real estate? Or are you putting that to work, or have any investing in the kids? What are you kind of doing now with just that extra, this cash flow is coming in without those big expenses?
Yeah. So everything that I do is surrounded by investing, and I want to really punch this home for everyone who's listening, because I'm going to use the word invest, but it's going to be in a way that you don't always think of. So first off, I invest in people, meaning that I give. So that's how I look at giving, as it's an investment into people, or into local church, nonprofit, different organizations, things like that. So you have that. I'll invest in myself, learning, building, like sharpening myself from a mental standpoint. I've always been about health and wellness. So I'm going to make sure, because we only get one body. So I want to make sure to take care of my temple. So that's part of investing in self, and just general things around self-care. But then, like, traditionally, what people think from an investing standpoint, oh man, I mean, at this point, I do investments with real estate, stock market stuff, index funds, ETFs, individual stocks, um, uh, got cryptocurrency holdings.
That was gonna be my next question, y'all in the crypto, but
Oh
yeah.
yeah. I've well, for a few years now, I've been doing private equity investing too. So that may sound fancy, but just think like being able to invest in Facebook or Uber before they're publicly traded. Um, so, and that, I mean, that's a different world altogether. I mean, it can get pretty crazy pretty quick, but you have to be you have to be what is called an accredited investor to be able to be in that space, which you can look that up. It's well, now there's three designations for that. Either you have to have a net worth of $1 million, and I want to say it's outside of your residence. Um, if you're an individual, you have to make $200,000 a year for the last like 2 or 3 years, or if you're a couple, it may be like 300 for two people together. And now they just added a new distinction of if you are licensed in the financial space, that you can be an accredited investor as well. So that people like to talk about that because that is pretty cool and neat. But the other ones, they're good because everyone for sure on here can do that. Like you don't have to have any special designation to invest in the stock market, do cryptocurrency, which just be mindful, very volatile. It moves a lot of different directions. So it's okay if that's not your cup of tea. And even from a real estate standpoint, if you're like, man, I don't have the kind of money to purchase a building, you can invest in things called Reits, which are real estate investment trusts, where there are companies that they do the real estate investing and managing, and you can have ownership stake in those, and they overwhelmingly pay what's called a dividend. Like essentially all of them do, where you just get paid money for owning them. And I do have some of those in my portfolio where we'll just get paid money as an owner for REITs and different individual positions. So I know that was a lot, but that's the full answer.
Yeah, no, that's good, man, because it's very diverse. And so, man, as we always say, money just compound, money make money. You got to a point where now your job is a side hustle, bro. Like your investments is your main bread. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
that's the ideal lifestyle. And you're so young, man, at 36 and got all this in front of you. But at the end of the day, man, you still honor God, and that's the most important thing because He will continue to enlarge your territory because you've been a good steward
yeah.
over your finances in itself. So, what I would like to do now, Steve, is I was kind of like to open this up to the community. We have people on Facebook as well, along with our on our live Zoom here, and have the opportunity for anyone that's live here to ask Steve some questions here based on what you've heard tonight or some of the things that you would like to learn a bit more about. And so I just want to open up that opportunity now. If you don't mind, you can open up your mics or send chats, and let's ask Steve some more questions here.
Nice.
Sure, and I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Hey, so Steve, I want to thank you for all your time tonight. Been very good listening to you. But one thing I want to I'm kind of intrigued about is your decision to actually pay off your primary residence. Would love to know like what made you go that route, and did you consider also paying off your primary residence versus investing more in, I guess, in other real estate, and what have you seen in terms of tax consequences as well?
Yeah, so I get that question a fair amount about that and I'm pretty straightforward with people. I know I could have gotten a bigger return elsewhere as far as paying the house off. For me, it was layered. So I wanted my kids to see what was possible, that it could be done. What it also did for me is it opened me up to be that much more aggressive from an investment standpoint. And I'll just put it like this: more than made that up, just in some different things that I probably wouldn't have been as aggressive in investing as far as amount and opportunity, because I knew the house was paid off. So I'll give numbers because I like to give at least give you some framework. So for instance, I had an investment last year that I had invested in July of 2020, and from July of 2020 to the spring of this year, 2021, it went up 200 times my original investment. And I said, I'm out.
Wow.
I was like, man, I could never get another one of these and I'll be good.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, and the way you got to think about it too is from a tax standpoint, because people talk about, oh, well, you don't get that write-off on the mortgage interest, but I'm not paying it either, the mortgage interest.
Right.
So those were other things. But like I said, for me, and this is why I tell people, personal finance, the operative word in it is personal. So you've got to balance what you're thinking to do. Because for me, I mean, by the time we paid the house off, like we were worth over $1 million. So I mean, we were doing all right. And I had a real estate investment deal go dramatically better than what I expected. Because honestly, the goal was to pay the house off in 2020. That was the plan. And it ended up happening sooner than that.
Wow.
So yeah, but great questions. Specific stocks, ETFs, et cetera, that you really recommend for long-term hold. I would say for the ones you listed, QQQ. So for people who aren't familiar, that's basically like an index fund that follows the NASDAQ, which is very technology heavy. VOOG is, S&P 500, growth side. And I'd imagine people have heard of Tesla at this point. You probably know who the CEO is by name, but if you don't, Elon Musk. I do have positions for sure. I typically will save those for people that I'm working with, of letting them know, hey, these are positions that I hold, and also just from doing research of what are things that I really like going forward. But I will say this: I do like what you listed. You got to understand the risk for sure when you're saying individual stocks like Tesla, which I think they're quality. I do think they'll grow over time. And I'm a fan of the other two that were listed, QQQ, VOOG. Yeah, so that's what I would say on that. Because when I'll tell people, I give them the justification for why I like them, of not just blindly like, hey, oh yeah, I like this, I like that, but just actually talking through, the balance sheet, some of the fundamentals of the company, what is their business, what are the trends of this industry. But just to be on wax, I will give you a 1, just cause I appreciate y'all. So a company that I have liked for sure, and it was one during the pandemic, which I still actually believe there's some meat on the bone here, But I would always say, do your own due diligence. Make sure you have an understanding of what you're looking at, what you're doing. And you'd even want to know where you want to get in at. But there's this tiny company you guys may have heard of. They even have a little symbol on cards that people use every day called Visa. Very dominant in their space. And you just got to understand, how does Visa make money? And I think you would see how it's something that's has a high likelihood of growing over time versus coming down. And they do pay a dividend, which just means they pay their shareholders a share of their profits that a board determines what that payout will be. So yeah, I know this is recorded, so don't say no one told you anything. So that's all I got.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. That's very good information. I like Visa because, hey, people are always going to be spending money, right? So, so we have any more questions here?
Yeah. And while y'all are thinking of questions, I'll say this, and now you guys have a little bit of an understanding, is when I work with people, because I'll do financial coaching, just because I care about people, I care about the community, I want to see people win, and I understand that from an access standpoint, most people, they're not going to talk to somebody with this varied amount of experience, knowledge, like actually having done it, and just some of the connections of being in this space. But when I'll tell people, I'm like, hey, I promise you, whatever you may be paying me to work with me, don't feel any pressure. I promise you, it's not moving the needle one way or the other for me personally. Like, I'm just putting a cost to what my time would be. But I make way more as an investor. I promise you that. And
yeah. And that's, I'm a firm believer of that. That's that's a good statement.
Right. Hey, don't be shy, y'all. I promise I don't bite.
Let me see here. Okay, yeah, EJ, go ahead here. Let me see here. How did you acquire your starting capital if you had much to attain your real estate? And what would you do differently or advise someone trying to start?
So the way I acquired it was just straight up living within my means and saving money. That I wish I could tell you something magical. That was it. Like, I'd work, live on less, put money aside.
Steve, how much did you pay down for your first property?
Holy moly. I wonder if I can pull the numbers. That may take a bit.
No. You're not that serious. Yeah. But I was just saying, if you had like a ballpark figure.
It was, I could tell you pretty close. So I bought a home it was a single family home in Cleveland, Ohio for $66,500. And so let's say the down payment was 20%, then I'll probably put in about 15 to start, to be able to just acquire it. And then I had to, work through the different costs as far as holding costs and, like, because now you bought it, you got a mortgage, paying, contractors and different things like that. So yeah. Oh, we got Marcus. Spoke about investing in yourself from an education perspective, learning, or some people to follow, books to read, podcasts, etc. So the first book I'm going to name, I kind of was already thinking this way, but a lot of people like this book. I'll be honest with you. For me, it was maddening when I read it because I'm like, tell me what to do. But it's a book that, I mean, I still think it's a reasonable book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's around, mindset, thinking about buying, income producing assets, like what types of things do you want to put your money towards to build wealth. I would say for me, when I read it, I was already thinking that way. So it drove me crazy because I'm like, yo, what am I supposed to be buying? And how? You know what I mean? But I think it's a pretty good like mindset uh shifting type of a book for many. So that's one. There was oh my gosh, there's a book by Gary Keller, who's the founder of Keller Williams. I wish I could tell you what it's called Millionaire Real Estate Investor. Millionaire Real Estate Investor by Gary Keller. So it actually is right back there. I just looked. I was like, yeah, I think I still have it. So that's a pretty good one. There's tons of podcasts. I mean, at this point, I mean, I've done the stuff for a really long time. So much of what is getting discussed is probably stuff that I'm already really familiar with. There's sometimes where people will send me stuff and ask me what I think about it. And I'll be like, yeah, it's pretty good. From what I hear, that's solid. So that's what I would say there. There is a book called One Up on Wall Street. That's a pretty good book by Peter Lynch. Which it just kind of talks about that people you have more insight than you think around investing in the stock market or what are called edges. I mean, you just have some familiarity with what's going on. So for me, I can remember in the past that I had worked in a space where I had to use a program called Salesforce. I'll just use an example for everyone. And so like I was familiar with Salesforce and how it worked, which helped me to get a better understanding of the company itself. And they've had some pretty dramatic growth over time, but I was already familiar with it from having done some work with it. So that's kind of some of the thought process around that book. One Up on Wall Street is that you may know, like the author of the book, he used an example where his wife was going to Bed Bath and Beyond. And he was just sitting out in the mall, or, while she was shopping, just kind of waiting for her to do whatever she needed to do. And he noticed that it was packed. And this was early for Bed Bath and Beyond, that it was packed, a lot of people in there coming through. It's like, hey, this seems like a pretty good business, and started looking at more and did the research, did his due diligence into the company. And he invested in it and made an insane return off of that investment, which this guy, Peter Lynch, he used to run the Magellan Fund for Fidelity. So for those that are wondering who he is, but very sharp investor. Somebody said, "Oh, not in the Salesforce. They've taken over the work." Man, they are a monster, man. There's no one who does what they do. Like, they don't really have a direct competitor. which generally speaking, as an investor, that is a phenomenal thing to have. Ain't great when you're a consumer, but if you're an investor, a lack of competition is a good thing. So
I have another question.
yeah, go ahead, man.
Hey, how you doing? So I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, and I'm watching the way that you think, right, about stocks and just the viewpoint of, like, I could see the I guess the gears moving in your head of how to purchase a stock, like which stock to purchase based on trends and things like that. How would you tell someone who's just starting out, or advise someone who's just starting out, how to get to that point where they're thinking like that, like what I guess resources, what to look for, how did you get to that point, that perspective?
Ooh, yeah. I mean, it's obviously it's practiced habits over time, and sharpening and learning and building. I would tell most folks to you can start with a strategy that's, for short, it's DCA, or dollar cost averaging, where you're buying quality and you're just saying, hey, I'm going to buy this on the 20th of the month, every month, that I'm going to buy the same amount and get in on whatever the investment may be. And you may start with something that's broad and diversified, like an index fund or an ETF, to just get started. And as you build, there's some basic things you can look for. I would say looking at like a balance sheet, or looking at what's the cash flow of a company, like what's their revenues look like over time? What are their profits look like over time? Do they beat their estimates, like their earnings estimates? Are they consistent in that? What are some other good things that I'm just trying to think that aren't like super in the weeds? I always say start with, is this industry growing? So like, if you are investing in a company that they believe that the future of entertainment is linear TV, meaning that, like the old school days of watching Fresh Prince every Monday night at 8 o'clock at night, and then waiting to the next week and watching the next episode. I don't believe that's a trend that we're headed towards. I think we've ran far away from that things are more on demand, binge it out over a weekend on your time, no commercials, you know what I mean? Or depending on the platform, maybe limited commercials. So just some of it can just be natural thought of, where are things headed? Like, I use Visa as an example because a question that I would ask is, do you think we're moving closer to or further away from a cashless society? Now, I don't believe that we will be ever fully cashless. But if you just go to a grocery store and just sit there for 10 minutes and count how many people pull out cash versus swipe a card or tap a card or put their phone out and scan. So some of this stuff it's not as difficult as you would think. Much of it, you just got to have discipline. And once you have an eye for it, that's the stuff, like when I do work with people, I try to help people understand how to have an eye for the stuff, of what to look for. But from a mentality standpoint, I already know for every dollar I spend, it's worth about $10 to me in the future, like in the next roughly 10 years, because I'm always looking for what are called 10 baggers, things that I believe can go up 10x in the next decade. Now, what that means is I still am going to live, y'all. Like, I'm still going to live and eat and do life, enjoy, entertain, have friends, go on vacation, things like that. But I do put things through a filter of, okay, is this meaningful to me? Is this impactful? Does this have an eternal impact? Does this have a long lasting impact? Whatever it is, I'm running it through that filter, because every dollar costs me about 10 as far as what I'm looking to get in a return. So hopefully that helps you all just on from a mindset standpoint.
Yeah, I think that's very, 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 very good here, Steve. So for the sake of time here, I want to also say here, we'll take one more question, but I also want to introduce the community how they can actually follow you as well on social media. So I want to share with you guys here. I found Steve here on social media, in particular here on Instagram. So if you have an Instagram account, you can follow here. Here's Steve IG handle stacking with stack.
Yep.
And you will see all of his information that he posts here. Great words of wisdom. And so I thought that he would just be a great asset to the Let's Win financial community. So if you are on Instagram and if you're not following Steve, we're going to ask for you to go ahead now and to go ahead and follow Steve, to follow these daily nuggets of what he's producing as well. And I believe, Steve, you mentioned earlier that you've written a book.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It's so it's just called Simple Money Talks. And it's just conversations with my 8-year-old daughter. So Simple Money Talks. And in the book, and she's a co-author on the book too, by the way, which is talking about generational wealth. That was intentional because I want to shatter any potential glass ceiling that she may have of what her potential is, as she grows and matures and et cetera. But so the book itself, it's just about our money conversations. I think you guys will appreciate it. It's an easy, quick read. There's stuff that'll probably make you laugh, definitely things that'll make you think. And it's really for everyone, but especially if money has ever been intimidating for you, I put things in a way of these are conversations with an 8-year-old about money. And I give some background into why the conversations went the way they went.
Now, Steve, how can we actually go find and buy that book?
So, well, if you go on Instagram, it's actually in my bio. But okay. Let me see. I'll put a link to it in the chat real quick.
Okay. And I'll share it again here. Let me see here.
Yeah, because I just got it in ebook form.
Is it right here on your link tree?
Yes. So if you click that.
Okay.
Simple Money Talks.
Simple Money Talks. Okay. Awesome. This is great here on IG with the link tree. So you see Steve's website, all access here to Steve and some of the resources that he have here. This is pretty good here. So we go to Simple Money Talks here. Here's an ebook, and I will be buying this tonight. And we're going to also be supporting other Let's Win financial community members as well, and getting this out to some of our members as far as giveaways as well in the future. So, this is awesome here. This is awesome. I like this Gumroad as well. This is a platform where you have, You want to talk about that a little bit, Steve, on the Gumroad as far as that source of income, writing different things, because I know a little bit about it, but the community, they'll be encouraged as well, know a little bit more about Gumroad.
Yeah. So what the world has changed So let me just encourage everyone who's on here of there was a time where there were so many barriers or potential roadblocks to being able to just write a book. Like, you know, you had to pitch it. There's only so many publishers. Like, the internet was not what it is today. I may take y'all way back to like AOL, you know what I mean? Like, where you had dial up making all these crazy sounds just to get on the internet. That's not the case today. I would tell you, if you've got something meaningful to share, you can just write. At this point, you can just write. I mean, and you can, there's free resources. You can go to Canva. If you're familiar with canva.com, you can design a book. Like, so you can write it and then you've got everything written and then you just put it in and design the book in there. Oh, I love it. He's pulling it up. Yeah, it's free. You can do a free sign up and design your book. And they've got different little templates that you can use to try to figure out your, you know, your aesthetic for your book. And then you look at something like a Gumroad, like you don't even have to have any like startup, like they'll just take their cut out of any, you know, sales that you have, where you can just set it up for free to, you know, do digital products. So there's a lot of things. I mean, at this point, oh my Lord, I probably could make a course on how to write a book, how to design one, like, you know, how to set, you know what I mean? Like, just to try to save people's time and get their efforts right, to get your thoughts out there. Because likely people want to hear what you got to say.
This is good, Steve. Thank you for that, because we're in the information age now, with COVID, especially when people just home. So they just want to observe just information in itself. So, but Steve, this has been awesome tonight, man. I want to thank you for taking up your time here to come and educate the Let's Win financial community and share your story. That's probably the main thing, as far as being inspired about some of the things that you're doing now, and just as you continue to do, man. So, you know, this has just been awesome, man. The community, they've been blessed tonight through your efforts and sharing your story. Because oftentimes people at your particular level, they don't necessarily want to share their journey and kind of keep it to themselves. And so we appreciate you for all the things that you're doing and that what God has for you in the future. So I want to ask and see if you have any final thoughts or any final things that you would like to leave here with the community.
Well, first off, thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate being here. I see people saying thank you in the chat. You're welcome. And again, thank you for allowing me to share. And I think what I would leave people with is, so we started where we talked about this idea of, you know, like I am a man of faith. And so for those of you who are, you know, and I don't know where everyone's standing is, but for those who are, what I would say for believers is what it means to be successful is to be faithful.
Hmm.
And
That's
that's
deep.
regardless of what is being discussed. The mark of being successful as a believer is to be faithful.
Hmm.
It's well done, my good and faithful servant, not quote unquote successful. So remember that, be humble, love people, give people dignity and respect. And you'd be amazed at where your life can go. And I'll probably share this at some point on social media, just this thought. You know, I try to, you know, I always like to think and try to find creative ways to get good ideas across. But understand that if you're building generational wealth, it's not for the faint of heart, but I promise you it's worth it. And I'll say it again, building generational wealth is not for the faint of heart, but it is worth it. Keep going. Don't worry about perfection. It's about pattern, not perfection. So make progress in where you're trying to get to. Don't get too down on yourself, and don't get too high on yourself either. Love yourself correctly. So
Man,
those
Steve,
are part of it.
those last 3 nuggets that you just shared there, you could put it in a book in itself and to sell it, man. So those are some great closing comments, man. I want to thank you again for sharing your time tonight with us, man, and taking time out. As you say, you have a family, and so just want to thank you, man. So I would encourage everyone that's here and everyone that's watching on Facebook. We share with you Steve's IG. So I would definitely ask you to go out and support them, but then also to be able to benefit from that book if you have young kids, to have money conversations with your kids, because now you start having the money conversations with your kids. It just further benefits you and your kids later in life when they have the responsibility to make a choice. And so Steve is a great example of us and making those right money decisions in itself. So, Steve, thank you again for joining us. And I want to thank Let's Win Financial Community for the ones that's joining live. Thank you guys for joining in. And so, as always, as we end, I always say, be well, be blessed. And as always, let's continue to win. Thank you again, Steve. All right. Good night, everyone.